a rampage.
This video is terrifying.
Chopping away at a door.
Stop right there.
Hey, my goddamn door!
Residents fight back.
They're tired of people stealing their packages.
It's like better than an episode of Cops.
And a group of unlikely heroes.
Wait, these aren't cops giving chase.
He got so angry.
This is an amazing story.
Unbelievable viral crimes.
Hands up!
You know you're probably about to get trampled.
Caught on camera.
Car's moving, car's moving.
Man makes a split decision.
Okay, he's bailing.
All he hears are hooves.
20 feet to your left.
January 16, 2019, DeLand, Florida. It's 1:30 a.m. when a sheriff's deputy makes a routine stop.
The light over the license plate was out, so simple traffic stop.
But as they run his plates, the driver takes off.
He had all of these other violations. Once they were found out, he was clearly going to go to jail, so he books it.
Car's moving, car's moving.
Police immediately call in air reinforcements and deploy spike strips, which are used to stop cars by puncturing their tires.
51 got stick hit.
Going very slow.
Police are able to stop the car with the spike strips, but then the man makes a split decision.
He decides to get out on foot and make a run for it.
Okay, he's bailing.
It's the middle of the night, so probably he's thinking, they can't see me in the dark, right?
He's running across a field.
But their eye in the sky certainly can. And the infrared camera picks up on something else that has joined in to chase the suspect.
I have to imagine how scared he is. All he hears are hooves behind him as he's running, and they are charging towards him.
Oh, those are horses coming after me.
The horses get dangerously close to him.
Jumped over a fence. Horse just chased him down.
Now, the suspect is cornered in a fenced field, and with police dogs sniffing him out, it's game over.
20 feet to your left, right now, right now.
Right there. Let me see your hands. You got it fit. Hands up! Get your hands up! Hands up!
When you're in a police chase and anytime you have to get on foot, you really should just give up.
You guys got him?
Yeah, they got him.
Police arrest 36-year-old Dominic Maltzby and saddle him with charges of fleeing and attempting to elude, resisting without violence, and driving with a suspended license. He's sentenced to 20 months. Video of the horse takedown goes viral, and the horse, who is at the front of the pack, becomes a news darling.
I want to introduce you to Shiloh, one of the heroes in this story.
Shiloh's owner slept through all the excitement and tells reporters she had no idea it was her horse until she saw him on TV.
It can't be my house, and I kept looking at her, and then I saw Shiloh in the front.
I've heard of wild goose chases before, but I've never seen a wild horse chase that ends up solving a crime.
And you've never seen an attack as horrifying as the one in this next viral video.
Police responding to a chaotic series of events.
A man armed with a pickaxe.
And he picked up the axe again.
This video is terrifying.
May 22nd, 2023, Lake Forest, California. A porch camera captures a car speeding to a violent crash. Suspiciously, the driver runs off, leaving the car in a precarious position.
The car crash in and of itself is pretty remarkable.
I'm asking myself, how did this vehicle get on two wheels?
A few blocks away, another porch camera captures the driver breaking into a house.
Where is he trying to go?
What happens next is terrifying. The man has found an axe, and he's wielding it at someone from inside the house.
You can see him chasing him around the neighborhood. The police were getting a number of phone calls about a madman with a pickaxe.
And the horror is just beginning.
The guy goes back in the house.
He's using this pickaxe to break down this door. You can hear someone behind it.
What is he going to do with that pickaxe once he gets on the other side of that door?
Inside the bedroom, a man can be heard screaming in fear.
Imagine the paralyzing terror of someone trying to break into your room with an axe. You can see the axe progressively getting through the door more and more.
And then...
He's face to face with a maniac with an axe.
Is he planning to kill this person?
In Lake Forest, California, a maniac with an axe has busted through a bedroom door, terrorizing the person inside.
What's wrong, dude? What's wrong? Talk to me. You okay?
Just in time, he gets the upper hand.
He finally overpowers his attacker. He gets the weapon out of his hands.
But when police arrive, they mistake him for the suspect.
It's not me, it wasn't me.
Axeman takes advantage of the confusion and grabs his weapon back.
He was lucky that the real assailant came forward, made it clear that he was the maniac.
Terrified for his life, the victim runs back to his room. Police fire some beanbag rounds at him, but the man refuses to drop the axe. Instead, he retreats to the same room where his victim is hiding.
Not knowing if the person's okay, it's scary. What is going on right now? Is it a struggle over the pickaxe?
Police need to move quickly before this turns deadly. They storm in and arrest 32-year-old Tyler Graves. It turns out he's a tenant in this house, and he knows the man he was terrorizing. Officials believe he was under the influence. Graves is taken to a hospital for injuries he got when he crashed that car. Luckily, nobody else is hurt.
This is literally like something out of a horror movie or a nightmare. Who's to say he wouldn't have gone home to home breaking in?
Video of the axe terror quickly goes viral and tops national news.
Going on the attack with a pickaxe.
A man with an axe chopping away at a door.
The tenant who was behind the door is too shaken to show his face, but tells reporters how he managed to wrestle the axe away.
I noticed that he was starting to get tired, so I tried to look for a good point in time where he might want to take a little break from swinging the axe for a second, and when he did that, I just swung the door open.
It isn't clear what set Graves off, but the man he first chased out of the house is his landlord. In news interviews, he says Graves had only been renting from him for 10 days.
Calm down, please. What happened? What happened? You know, he never answered. He's going to kill him.
Graves is charged with assault with a deadly weapon, exhibiting a deadly weapon, and resisting arrest.
Talk about the tenant from hell. I don't think the idea that you would get a pickaxe-wielding tenant attacking your other tenants probably ever even entered his mind.
Most criminals fear getting caught, but you won't believe the gotchas in these next viral videos.
Hey, my goddamn door!
Talk about a crazy story.
Classic snatch and run.
Once he sees the gun,
Stop. Stop.
Caught red-handed.
Give it back. I didn't hit. That's me.
Porch pirates can be shockingly bold. In Virginia, a woman anxiously awaits an important delivery.
This is a very expensive tablet for her husband.
When the $1,600 gadget finally arrives, a man who says he's visiting the house walks up behind the delivery woman. But this is no friendly visit.
This is your classic snatch and run.
The driver is devastated.
You want to come in? No, I'm good. I appreciate it. I just wanted to let you know.
My heart went out to her. That's not something that you ever want to happen to you, especially at work.
And video of the brazen theft goes viral.
Swiping a package straight from the delivery driver's hands.
Her FedEx delivery driver was knocking on her door frantically, but not because she needed a signature.
Sorry, I'm shaking.
But sometimes it's the pirates who are in for the shock.
Stop right there. Oh, stop.
In New York, this guy thinks he's found an easy target.
I love doorbell cameras because you can see everything. This homeowner sees this guy stealing packages off of his porch.
I just saw somebody on my Ring camera steal 2 packages.
Camouflage jacket, white hoodie, gray sweatpants, black backpack.
Moments later, the jig is up.
Excuse me. Hi. Stop right there. Stop. Stop. Stop.
The thief here definitely got more than he bargained for because now he's in a foot chase.
These cops are in hot pursuit.
Out of camera view, he ditches his coat and backpack, so he's harder to recognize. And for a moment, it seems like they've lost him.
Then completely out of the blue, he gets tackled.
But not by police. Instead, it's a city employee who leaps out of an idling car.
This guy sees the police chasing someone and says, I'm gonna step in and help.
The footage makes national news, clocking tens of thousands of views.
Running into this individual from DPW is like running into a soda machine. It's a bad idea.
Caught the guy and there was a tackle. It was like better than an episode of Cops.
27-year-old Francisco Jose Eder Mateo is charged with petty larceny and criminal possession of stolen property.
I'm willing to bet he's not gonna be stealing any more packages anytime soon.
In California, a woman is relaxing at home.
She's in bed at 11:30. I love a lady of leisure. She's having a fine time.
But then she gets some notifications from her doorbell camera. And springs into action.
Hey, my goddamn door!
What I love the most is that she intentionally snuck up on the woman. She was very quiet about opening the door. She catches the thief off guard.
Hey, my goddamn door!
And she's like, I want to teach her a lesson.
Give it back. I didn't get nothing. I didn't get nothing.
You know, the woman is playing dumb. She's acting like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong.
Everything's in front of my goddamn house. Do you hear me? I hear you.
The homeowner posts the video as a warning to others, and it's a viral hit.
That porch pirate didn't take anything because Shira Booker made sure that she didn't get away.
It was kind of one of those moments like, oh, you got the right one today. And sometimes you do have to get a little Rice Krispie and snap, crackle, and pop because people just need to know, like, you're not the one to mess with.
In Washington, a frustrated homeowner comes home day after day to find packages missing. Sometimes he catches them in the act.
Hey, you want to put that back?
But not all of them. So he creates a homemade booby trap.
Idiot.
It's a box that looks like a regular package, except inside is a blank shell from a 12-gauge shotgun. So when you touch it, there's a startling noise. It's just a pop, no explosion. But it sends one pirate after another running for their lives. The novel anti-porch pirate invention makes the news.
Fighting back. They're tired of people stealing their packages.
He rigged a package that detonates when it's lifted.
I wanted to come up with a solution that would deter and prevent.
The gotcha videos rack up millions of views.
An amazing story.
Terrified.
But wait, these aren't cops giving chase.
I was just dead-eyeing them.
They marched them back.
January 5th, 2024, Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's a chilly winter day, and 5 high school seniors are relaxing at their favorite house.
Noah's house is barely a block away from our school. After school, if we had nothing to do, we'd go over, chill out, play video games.
They were like, Noah, I don't ever want to leave.
The teens are in the middle of an intense video game when Noah's mother sees 2 boys outside behaving suspiciously.
Out of the window, you could see them like kind of creep up.
The boys are eyeing some packages on the front porch of a neighbor's house.
You could see them snatch the packages and run off. And so she yelled to Larry, "Hey, I think those guys just stole packages." Larry looks at Noah. He's like, "Do you want to go chase after him?" Noah's like, "Yeah."
Like the heroes in their favorite video games, the 5 friends run after the thieves.
You know, teens get a bad rap for being rowdy and disrespectful. I love these kids. I love that they sprung into action.
It could have been really important to someone's survival. Like if that was medicine for someone's dad or someone's grandpa, you could have potentially harmed them. It wasn't even like a decision-making process for any of us. It was just, bam, let's go. I leaped and soared down the steps in one go.
As they chase them down the street, they can tell the young porch pirates are worried.
Terrified. That's how they were terrified. And it's understandable because Larry is 6'1", Alex is 6'5", Jordan is 6'7".
The young pirates try to conceal their stolen goods in a nearby apartment complex.
They were hiding the packages because they knew we were coming.
Have these teens now put themselves in danger?
We've never been in these apartments, so we don't know who's in there, if they have any kind of weapons, if there's more of them. And then, like, we kind of just encircled them.
We all go up to them. It's like, hey, man, where the packages at? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So,
Kai just looks behind the apartments. 2 boxes are in the mud.
I don't think it's possible for these guys to be any worse at crime.
We were just like, man, what should we do with these guys? And you're like, you know what? Let's make them knock on the door and tell the people what they did.
You have to face whoever you stole from. That is the only way you get out of this.
They marched them back to the home with the packages to give them back and apologize.
As they walk, they offer the young pirates some advice.
We were just explaining to them, like, there's no reason to be stealing from people's porches, especially in this neighborhood. Everyone's gonna have a Ring doorbell camera. You're gonna get caught.
When the boys hand over the stolen goods, the homeowner gives them another harsh lecture.
He got so angry. I mean, understandably so. But at one point, he was like, you two, you disgust me. But you guys, I'm proud of you.
Even though he's livid, the homeowner sends the young thieves home without getting the police involved.
You're just lucky that we're the ones that caught you and it wasn't police, or the guy didn't want to press charges.
Noah's mother is so proud, she gives the footage to local media. And the teens' heroics immediately go viral, with 1.5 million views.
Wait, these aren't cops giving chase. They're 5 best friends.
Tonight, this is an amazing story. A group of Fort Smith teens catching porch pirates red-handed.
The teens hope the porch pirates have learned their lesson.
I haven't seen them since. I hope they're embarrassed. At the same time, I bet you money that they won't ever do this again.
Hopefully, it steers the thieves down a different path.
A dangerous crime spree.
Stores ransacked and windows shattered.
A defiant driver.
Under no damn arrest.
Get out the car!
This whole video is a cop's worst nightmare.
A wild chase.
A chaotic stolen car crash.
Get on the ground!
With an end you won't see coming. And another fleeing criminal.
Drop the gun!
Thwarted by a very unlikely hero.
Caught on video, a brave grandpa.
The suavest man in history.
This is a really dangerous situation.
This is crazy! This is crazy!
2 nights of looting.
Bunch of criminal opportunists.
Out of control.
September 26th, 2023, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It happens as shops close for the day.
Free iPhones! Free iPhones!
A large mob of looters, estimated to be as many as 100, smash their way into one store after another. The violence erupts only half an hour after a peaceful protest about the dismissal of charges against a police officer who fatally shot a man in a car.
Dozens of residents and activists take to the streets of Center City. A range of emotions, as you can imagine: anger, there's sadness.
Police insist the rampant looting is not connected to the protest.
This had nothing to do with the protest. What we had tonight was a bunch of criminal opportunists take advantage of a situation and make an attempt to destroy our city.
Whatever is behind it, it's clear that the looters are disenchanted.
There's this anger at the system, this anger at society, and people are acting out as a result.
Police lock down as many streets as they can, but the looters keep spreading.
There is possibly a caravan of a number of different vehicles that were going from location to location.
One of the key instigators for the looting is a 21-year-old social media influencer named Meatball.
Everybody must eat! Yes!
Meatball's real name is Deja Blackwell, and she has thousands of followers. She uses her live stream to encourage the looters.
Where we going next? Where we going next?
Live streaming the looting, amassing thousands more followers, and broadcasting what stores and which locations to loot.
Thousands of people were watching the live stream.
It just started and we ain't finished.
How many of them could have just come down and joined this mob?
It becomes somewhat contagious. So they may be thinking, if they can get away with it, I can too. And they're more likely to commit crimes in a group versus on their own.
And as the mob of looters grows, police are severely outnumbered.
Who could control that size of a crowd?
The chaos dominates the news, and the videos quickly go viral.
Here along Cotman Avenue at Roosevelt Mall, they tore this store apart.
The night of looting in the city of Philadelphia continued into the early morning hours.
The mayhem continues for 2 days before police finally contain the looting.
Patrols will remain in place tonight and through the weekend in Philadelphia after 2 nights of looting in the city left stores ransacked and windows shattered.
In the days that follow, police make dozens of arrests. A total of 72 people are charged, including the live streamer Deja Blackwell. Police say that by using her social media to encourage the looting, Deja is directly responsible for destruction and theft. She faces a long list of charges, including riot and disorderly conduct. Most of the others arrested face charges of burglary. Experts say the long-term impact of mass looting hits everyone.
A lot of people think it's a victimless crime, but it's so not. Because these retailers, they have to now get security and there's more overhead. It all trickles down to the consumer. This increases our prices for stuff. It's gonna hurt the employees and the workers who need jobs in the force.
In this next shocking video,
Get out the car!
a woman hurts herself with her defiant attitude.
Get out of the car!
She's facing felony charges.
July 16th, 2019, Cashin, Oklahoma. It's a hot summer day when an officer spots a truck with a broken taillight.
So what's going on with your truck?
It's been hit.
This video starts out pretty calm. It's broad daylight, middle of the day. An elderly woman is pulled over for something very minor.
This looks like it's going to be a routine traffic stop.
How long ago has it been like that?
Probably about 6 months.
Having a taillight out for that long is both dangerous and illegal.
The officer said, you had plenty of time to get this addressed, so now you're going to get a ticket for it.
The officer says, hey, all I need you to do is sign this and you'll be on your way. The operator had other ideas.
Well, I did issue for a defective equipment. It's $80. You have till September 16th to take care of this. To get you to sign there with the X is.
So you don't even give a warning.
She gets a little sassy with him. You think that's probably going to be it. But then she takes it much, much, much further.
And what she does next, I did not expect. It only gets worse from here.
Cashin, Oklahoma. A woman who has been pulled over for a broken taillight is refusing to cooperate with the officer.
Let me issue you a citation. Sign there, please.
Well, I don't want to sign it because I don't want to do $80.
You don't want to sign it?
The officer is in no mood for obstinate defiance.
I can fix it.
All right.
That's all you want.
Go ahead, step out of the car.
Twice.
Because you're under arrest.
You know, there's a saying, F around and find out. This woman effed around and she found out. You can't negotiate with the police. You can't tell them what you will and will not do. They give commands and you follow them. That's how this works.
Step out of the vehicle. Step out.
This woman's combative from the beginning.
Step out. I'm giving you a lawful order. Step out.
You be fair with me, and I'll be fair with you.
Step out.
No.
You're under arrest.
No, I'm not.
To put it simply, this woman is a jerk. She is bullheaded, she is dismissive, and she has no respect for authority.
I'm placing you under arrest. Step
You
out.
are fully under no damn arrest.
Step out.
No, I'm not.
As someone who has covered crime for a very long time, when I'm seeing this video, in my mind, I'm racking up all the charges. She does not seem to be aware that what she's doing is wrong. She's treating this officer like he's a child that she can just have this argument with. It does not work that way.
Under no damn arrest.
Step out.
No, I'm not.
Why is she so confrontational? Why doesn't she want to get out of the vehicle? Could she use the vehicle as a weapon? Does she have a weapon in the car?
Before the officer can find out, things spin out of control.
Do not take off.
Shut up and give me that and I'll sign it.
Step out.
No.
We're beyond that.
Do you want me
Step
to-
out.
This whole video is a cop's worst nightmare.
305 dispatch. Got one taken off. Get out of the car!
When he finally catches up to her, she still refuses to voluntarily get out of the car.
Get out of the car! Get out of the car!
So at this point, this is no longer a traffic stop. This woman has multiple charges that she's going to be arrested for: fleeing the scene, reckless driving. There's a plethora of charges.
Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Put your hands behind your...
He tries to escort her to the ground. She's fighting the whole way.
Put your hands behind your back!
You can clearly see from the video, she's not gonna put her hands behind her back. She's kicking him, she's punching him, she's pushing him off. She's refusing to be arrested, which is the definition of resisting arrest.
So now, the officer has to resort to more drastic measures.
Put your hands behind your back! Lay down and put your hands behind your back. Now! No, you will not. You're gonna get it again.
I've been tased. It is painful. I don't wish it on anyone, which is why it's so effective. It's 5 seconds, and once you are tased, most of the time, people will do what you ask of them because they don't want to be tased again.
Finally, the woman relents and is taken into custody. 65-year-old Deborah Hamill pleads guilty to resisting an officer, obstruction, eluding, and operating a vehicle with defective equipment. She receives a 4-year deferred sentence and is ordered to pay a small fine. The story makes national news and goes viral, with armchair critics divided over the officer's actions.
Half the room's gonna say he shouldn't be using a taser on an elderly woman. Half the room's gonna say she's not complying. It's a discretionary call.
You hurt?
Yeah, I'm hurt.
What hurts?
Everything.
All right, I got EMS on the way, just hang tight.
This officer gets an A++.
Can I shut my pickup off?
I'll turn it off for you. Come on.
He was professional. He did everything right. He even showed compassion and kindness after everything was over and said, "Are you okay?" And, I didn't want to have to hurt you, but you gave me no choice, which she didn't.
So why didn't you take off?
Because I knew that you would arrest me.
I wasn't going to. All you had to do was sign a ticket.
You did not have to taser me.
You wouldn't comply. You wouldn't get out. And then you tried to kick me.
Yeah, I tried to kick you because I'm a country girl.
Next time, listen to what I'm telling you to do.
When the criminals in this next viral video take off, one lands himself in some seriously unpleasant trouble.
No one ever runs on a golf course unless something is wrong.
And we just got into a show.
November 15th, 2023, Glendale, Wisconsin. Elissa Boland is enjoying a fall day on the links.
It was a gorgeous day in November, which is unusual for Wisconsin.
What she doesn't know is that on a nearby throughway, trouble is brewing as police chase a stolen car.
The vehicle has a group of suspects in it. They come flying down the road.
The speed at which they were going was so extreme. Watching all the drivers having to duck and get out of the way, I'm sure their hearts are racing.
But then, the chase comes to a sudden and dramatic end.
Police try to throw out one of those strips to stop the vehicle. The driver tries to get around it, ends up losing control of the vehicle.
The crash is so violent, it is heard clearly on the nearby golf course.
I just looked at my friend and said, gosh, I hope everyone's okay. That sounded pretty bad.
Even though the SUV crashes into a concrete barrier, 4 suspects jump out and keep running.
The entire group bolts.
But a golf course offers few places for a person to hide. Glendale, Wisconsin. After violently crashing a car they stole, 4 suspects make a run for it.
Of course, one of the suspects didn't have the cardio, gets caught right there.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get down!
Some of the other suspects head straight for a nearby golf course with police in pursuit.
We hear the crash, and within probably 3 minutes, we see the first guy come running across right in front of us.
No one ever runs on a golf course unless something is wrong.
One suspect actually asks the golfers for advice.
He heads towards the river, which is no way to get across it unless you jump in and swim across. He said, help me, where can I go? What do you want us to do? I don't know how we're gonna help you.
As police cruisers barrel across the fairway, someone offers an assist.
You want to use this cart?
That'd be awesome. We'll get back.
Elissa is recording the wild scene on her phone.
A nice, relaxing, beautiful day on the golf course.
When things turn comical. One of the suspects is inside this porta potty.
He opens it and jumps in, and all of us look at each other like we're in disbelief that he's actually going to hide in the porta potty.
He probably thinks like, oh, I'm just gonna pretend that I was playing golf and I needed to use the bathroom. Nobody will suspect a thing.
That's when Elissa's friend takes matters into his own hands.
He went around in front of the porta potty and tipped it over in literally a matter of seconds. He heard a bunch of sloshing, and he said to the guy, good luck, man, and walked away.
In this moment, I'm assuming the criminal realizes that he is literally out of luck.
The cops are not amused.
Yeah, you need to get out. Crawl out, dude. Don't do anything stupid. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. It's me. I commandeered a cart.
Stop it.
I'm not kidding.
You smell like Whew. Thanks.
And it means everyone in the patrol car is in for one stinky ride.
I don't think there's enough windows or AC you could open and blast to get the smell out of that, and the car seats. I'm sure everybody in that vehicle was suffering the entire ride.
Man, we just got into a show.
Alyssa doesn't even finish her round before news crews catch wind of the stinky arrest.
We were on the 9th hole, and we see a cameraman and a reporter heading towards the porta potty.
New video tonight of the chaotic stolen car crash and chase in Glendale.
The video quickly goes viral, netting tens of thousands of views. And commenters have a field day making fun of the situation. 2 of the suspects are charged with operating a vehicle without consent and drug possession. 2 others remain at large. And for Alyssa, it's a day on the links that will never be matched.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
In our next viral video, a brave man makes a move that surprises everybody.
God! 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 God!
Officers were coming towards him.
A very dangerous individual.
This man is a hero.
Get on the ground!
April 3rd, 2018, Columbus, Ohio.
There's a suspect running through the parking lot of a local library, and the police are hot on his tail.
You learn a lot about yourself and how fast you really are not when you start to chase someone who's running for their life. They're usually running a lot faster.
The chase begins a few blocks away, where a group of people are arguing in a car. When police come to check it out, this man takes off, and they suspect he's armed.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
The intense chase goes on for a few minutes, until suddenly,
You see this older man kind of just walking outside of a library, and then all of a sudden, a foot chase just runs into him.
it turns out the collision was no accident.
This older man is the suavest man in history. Just simply puts his foot out. He doesn't know if this man is armed, why he's running. He doesn't know any of the backstory, but he knows he has to get involved to help.
I saw who you guys were chasing, and I could see that he was holding something in his waistband while he was running from you guys, but he had a pretty good lead on your closest officer. He was coming my way, so I got in his way to slow him down.
And there, the criminal went flying.
On the ground! Drop the gun!
Now, the police who might have lost this guy if it weren't for that clever trip close in.
He went one way and the gun went another, and then he went after to try to retrieve the gun as fast as he could, and that's when I ducked out of the way.
When police arrest 19-year-old Deshaun Briggs, they discovered that he was indeed armed with a loaded 9mm pistol.
You're lucky you dropped that gun, man. Boy, you almost got shot. Let's lock those cuffs. I almost squeezed the trigger, man. I did too.
If there's any movement in the direction of that gun, the police officers are well within their right to use lethal force. So by him dropping that gun or losing that gun during the trip, the officer's right. That trip did possibly save his life.
Briggs is charged with having a weapon while under disability and sentenced to 2 years. The Kane trip makes international news and amasses more than 30 million views.
Caught on video, a brave grandpa trips an armed suspect fleeing.
People applaud the man they dub Grandpa, but he's actually a 54-year-old veteran. He opts to stay incognito, wearing sunglasses as he asks the media to just call him Bill.
I had one opportunity and I had to make the choice whether or not if I was going to act or if I was going to be a bystander.
Still, police make sure that Bill knows his actions aren't something to shrug off.
Cannot thank you enough, sir. You are an outstanding community member.
Oh, thank you. I just felt as a citizen of this town, I had a responsibility to act and to help.
Well, Columbus is proud to have you.
I think people are supposed to help.
I would say that this guy's not only a hero, but potentially a lifesaver, not only of the officers, but the suspect.
On the ground! Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
In a history of violent crime,
Some killers leave behind a trail so obvious that investigators quickly recognize a pattern. Others hide in plain sight. They move through everyday life unnoticed, protected not by brilliance, but by normality. Their greatest disguise is not a mask, a false identity, or a carefully constructed alibi. It is the simple fact that nobody expects them. In the mid-1990s, Western Germany was a region of busy highways, industrial cities, railway stations, and countless lives crossing paths every day. People traveled for work, for family, for opportunity. Trains arrived and departed. Cars flowed along the roads connecting Germany to neighboring countries. Millions of ordinary interactions took place without incident. Somewhere within that landscape, however, a predator was moving unnoticed. The victims did not know they were stepping into the final chapter of their lives. The people who passed them on the street did not know they would later become photographs in police files. Investigators examining one crime scene could not yet see how it connected to another, and the public had no reason to suspect that a serial killer was quietly operating across the region. Years later, the media would give him a name designed to evoke fear and horror: the Rhine-Ruhr Ripper. The nickname was a reference to the Rhine-Ruhr region of Germany, where several of the crimes occurred, and a comparison to one of history's most infamous killers, Jack the Ripper. The comparison was not based on time or place. More than a century separated the two men. Instead, it reflected the brutality of the crimes and the disturbing fascination with mutilation that investigators would eventually uncover. But before Frank Gust became a headline, before he became a subject of criminological study, before courts and psychologists examined his actions, he was simply another face in the crowd. A husband, a father, a man with a family, someone who, at first glance, appeared unremarkable. That contradiction lies at the center of this story. How could a man who lived what appeared to be an ordinary family life be responsible for some of the most disturbing murders in modern German criminal history? How could multiple killings spanning several years remain unconnected for so long? And perhaps most unsettling of all, were there warning signs long before the murders began? When investigators eventually looked backward through Frank Gust's life, they discovered a pattern that appeared to stretch all the way into childhood. The picture that emerged was not one of sudden violence, but of a progression, a series of troubling behaviors that, viewed individually, may have seemed isolated. Yet when placed together, they formed a deeply disturbing portrait. Frank Gust was born on May 24, 1969, in Oberhausen, Germany. His early years were marked by instability. His parents divorced while he was still young. Much of his childhood was spent in care facilities rather than in a stable family environment. According to later accounts, he was frequently bullied. The details paint a picture of a child growing up amid disruption and social isolation. Many children experience hardship without becoming violent criminals. Investigators and psychologists alike have repeatedly cautioned against simplistic explanations. Trauma does not create murderers. Difficult childhoods do not automatically lead to violence. Yet in Gust's case, there were additional warning signs that would later draw intense scrutiny. Around the age of 8 or 9, he reportedly began harming animals. One incident would become particularly significant in later psychological assessments. After killing a guinea pig, Gust allegedly described experiencing excitement when touching the animal's internal organs. To investigators examining his crimes years later, this event appeared to represent more than simple cruelty. It suggested an emerging fascination with violence and bodily destruction that would later become central to his offenses. At the time, however, nobody could see the future. Nobody could know where that path might lead. The years passed. The child became a teenager. and the behavior became increasingly disturbing. During adolescence, Gust reportedly entered morgues and came into contact with human corpses. According to investigative records, he developed obsessions involving death and sexualized interests connected to the deceased. These experiences would later become important components in attempts to understand his psychological development. Again, it is important to distinguish between hindsight and prediction. Today, looking backward, investigators can draw lines connecting events across decades. They can identify patterns invisible to those living through them. But at the time, these incidents existed as isolated moments scattered throughout a young man's life. No one was yet investigating a serial killer. No one was searching for links between animal cruelty, contact with corpses, and future homicide. Those connections would only become apparent years later, after multiple women had already lost their lives. The murders that eventually brought Frank Gust to national attention occurred between 1994 and 1998. The victims came from different backgrounds. One was a 28-year-old woman from South Africa who was hitchhiking through Europe. Two were women engaged in prostitution whom Gust encountered near Essen Central Station. Another was a woman connected to his own family through marriage, his wife's aunt. On the surface, these victims appeared unrelated. Different lives, different circumstances, different environments. That lack of an obvious connection would become one of the reasons the investigation proved so challenging. For years, authorities did not immediately recognize that the crimes were linked to a single offender. Each case presented its own questions. Each investigation followed its own path. The larger picture remained hidden. Meanwhile, the killer continued living his ordinary life. He returned home. He interacted with family members. He existed within society without attracting the level of suspicion one might expect from someone committing such acts. That dual existence remains one of the most unsettling aspects of many serial murder cases. The image people have of a violent offender often differs dramatically from reality. Popular culture encourages us to imagine monsters who look different from everyone else. Individuals whose danger is immediately obvious. Real life is often far more complicated. Sometimes the most frightening offenders are not hidden in remote places. They are woven into the fabric of everyday life. They attend family gatherings. They have neighbors. They raise children. And because they appear ordinary, they are frequently overlooked. As investigators would later learn, Frank Gust's motivations also distinguished him from many other murderers. The available evidence did not suggest financial gain. The murders were not committed to steal money, nor did they appear to be attempts to conceal another crime. Instead, investigators concluded that the violence itself was central. Gust was later described as a sexual sadist, a person who derives gratification from the suffering, pain, or death of others. That assessment would become a key element in understanding both the murders and the extreme mutilation that followed some of them. The brutality of the crimes shocked even experienced investigators. Bodies were mutilated. Some remains were dismembered. Certain acts appear designed not to conceal evidence, but to satisfy the offender's fantasies. Perhaps the most chilling detail attributed to Gust was a statement regarding a desire to touch the beating heart of a dying woman, whether viewed through a psychological or criminal lens. The statement offered a disturbing glimpse into the fantasies investigators believed were driving his actions. Yet despite all of this, despite the violence, despite the eventual notoriety, Frank Gust was not captured immediately. The mystery endured. Years passed. Cases accumulated. Questions multiplied. And then, unexpectedly, the first major crack in the facade appeared not through a dramatic forensic breakthrough or a lucky witness encounter, but through a conversation, a remark, a suggestion, a statement that would eventually travel from one person to another before reaching the authorities. That chain of events would begin unraveling the carefully maintained image of an ordinary family man and expose a reality far darker than anyone had imagined. By the time investigators finally assembled the pieces, for women were dead, a serial killer had been hiding in plain sight, and Germany would be forced to confront one of the most disturbing criminal cases in its modern history. This is the story of Frank Gust, the story of the man the media called the Rhine-Ruhr Ripper. And before we examine the murders themselves, we must first remember the people whose lives were taken, because behind every headline, every investigation, and every courtroom proceeding were real human beings whose stories deserve to be told. One of the recurring problems in true crime storytelling is that the person responsible for violence often becomes the most remembered figure in the narrative. Their photograph appears in documentaries. Their name is repeated in books and articles. Their actions are analyzed by investigators, psychologists, journalists, and historians. Meanwhile, the people whose lives were taken slowly fade into the background, reduced to brief descriptions in police records or court documents. The danger of that imbalance is that it can unintentionally transform a story about loss into a story about the offender. The case of Frank Gust is no exception. Over the years, the nickname the Rhine-Ruhr Ripper became known throughout Germany. Discussions focused on his crimes, his psychological profile, and the disturbing nature of his fantasies. Yet behind every investigative report stood 4 women whose futures were stolen, for lives interrupted, for families left to confront questions that would never be fully answered. Before examining the murders themselves, it is important to remember those victims and the circumstances in which they encountered the man who would ultimately take their lives. The first known victim was a 28-year-old woman from South Africa. The available records provide only limited details about her life. But even those few facts are enough to remind us that she was much more than a victim in a criminal case. She was a person who had traveled far from home. At some point during the year 1994, she was hitchhiking through Europe. For countless travelers, especially during that era, hitchhiking represented freedom, adventure, and opportunity. Roads connected countries, cultures, and experiences. Young travelers often relied on the kindness of strangers to move from one destination to another. Most journeys ended safely. Most drivers were ordinary people simply offering a ride. But hitchhiking also involved risk. Every decision required trust. Every vehicle that stopped represented an unknown choice. The woman from South Africa could not have known that one of those choices would place her in the path of a future serial killer. The details available about her final hours remain limited within the information provided. What is known is that Frank Gust picked her up and murdered her. Later, her remains would be discovered in a forest near Ede in the Netherlands. The body had been dismembered and decapitated. For investigators, the discovery was horrifying. For the victim's loved ones, it represented something even more devastating. Somewhere, far from where she had begun her journey, a life had ended in violence. The dream of travel became a tragedy. The future she expected would never arrive. Whenever we discuss criminal investigations, there is a tendency to focus on the evidence left behind. Investigators examine locations, timelines, and forensic findings. Yet every piece of evidence also represents the final trace of a human being who once had ambitions, relationships, memories, and plans. The woman discovered near Ede became the first known victim linked to Frank Gust. But she was not the last. 2 years later, another woman would enter the killer's path, then another. Both were women engaged in prostitution, and both encountered Gust near Essen Central Station. Their names are not included in the information available to us, but their vulnerability forms an important part of the story. Throughout history, offenders who target women involved in prostitution have often relied upon a disturbing reality. Such victims frequently occupy the margins of society. They may work in environments where encounters with strangers are routine. They may face dangers that others rarely consider. They may encounter violence more frequently than the general population. Because of these circumstances, serial offenders have repeatedly viewed them as easier targets. This reality is not unique to Germany. It appears across countless criminal investigations throughout the world. What makes these crimes especially tragic is that the victims are often judged, overlooked, or forgotten by the public. Yet their lives carry exactly the same value as anyone else's. They have families, friends, histories, hopes, fears. The women who crossed paths with Frank Gust near Essen Central Station were not statistics. They were human beings attempting to navigate their lives under circumstances that already involved significant risks. According to the available records, Gust approached these women and later murdered them. The violence inflicted upon them was extreme. Investigators reported severe mutilation of their bodies. Certain body parts were removed. The injuries were so disturbing that they became one of the defining characteristics of the case. The brutality shocked investigators and later contributed to comparisons between Gust and some of history's most notorious sexual killers. Yet focusing solely on the mutilation risks, overlooking a crucial fact. Before these women became victims, they were living individuals making their way through ordinary days. One moment they were standing in a busy transportation hub among hundreds of other people. The next, they had unknowingly encountered a predator. The contrast is chilling. A crowded public location often feels safe because of the number of people surrounding us. We assume danger is easier to recognize in isolated places. But serial offenders frequently exploit ordinary environments. They blend into them. They appear harmless. They move among everyone else unnoticed. That was one of the most frightening aspects of Frank Gust's crimes. Nothing about his public appearance immediately identified him as a killer. He was not hiding in abandoned buildings or living entirely outside society. He was participating in everyday life while simultaneously carrying out acts of extraordinary violence. The fourth victim introduced yet another disturbing dimension to the case. Unlike the previous victims, she was not a stranger encountered during travel or near a train station. She was connected to Gust through his own family. According to the information provided, she was approximately 47 years old and was the aunt of Gust's wife. Her murder stands apart from the others because it involved a personal relationship rather than a chance encounter. In many serial murder investigations, offenders establish patterns. They select victims from specific groups or situations. The inclusion of a family connection in this case demonstrates how dangerous Gust had become. The violence was no longer limited to strangers encountered in public spaces. It extended into the circle of people surrounding him. What must that realization have been like for those who knew him? Imagine discovering that someone trusted within a family was capable of such acts. Imagine the shock experienced by relatives as investigators uncovered evidence connecting him to multiple murders. The available records indicate that this victim's body was never fully recovered. Unlike the earlier cases, investigators were unable to rely entirely upon the discovery of complete remains. Nevertheless, evidence and testimony ultimately convinced the court that Gust was responsible. For the victims' loved ones, the absence of a fully recovered body likely created an additional layer of grief. In many homicide cases, the recovery of remains allows families to perform funerals, establish a place of mourning, and begin the difficult process of confronting loss. When remains are missing, that process becomes more complicated. Questions linger. Emotional closure becomes harder to achieve. Across all four victims, certain common themes emerge despite their different backgrounds. One woman was a traveler from another continent. Two women worked in prostitution. One was connected to the offender's own family. They did not share the same life experiences. They did not belong to a single social group. They did not know one another. Yet all four encountered the same individual, and all four paid with their lives. Understanding the victims also requires understanding the broader environment in which these crimes occurred. The murders took place between 1994 and 1998, a period during which investigators did not immediately recognize a single offender connecting the cases. From a modern perspective, it can be tempting to assume that patterns should have been obvious. Yet criminal investigations rarely unfold with the clarity found in movies or television dramas. Information arrives gradually. Evidence is incomplete. Jurisdictions may handle cases separately. Connections that appear obvious years later can remain invisible at the time. As a result, Frank Gust continued living his life while investigators struggled to assemble the larger picture. During those years, he maintained an outward appearance of normality. He was married. He had children. He lived as a seemingly ordinary member of society. This dual existence remains one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. Neighbors likely saw a family man. Acquaintances may have viewed him as entirely unremarkable. Few would have imagined that behind that ordinary exterior was a person responsible for multiple murders. The contrast between appearance and reality is one reason the case continues to attract attention. Among criminologists, society often seeks visible signs of danger. We want to believe that violent offenders can be identified through obvious traits. Cases like Frank Gust challenge that assumption. They remind us that some offenders successfully conceal their darkest behaviors behind ordinary routines and familiar roles. As we move deeper into this story, it is important to carry the memory of the victims forward. A young traveler crossing Europe. Two women working near a busy train station. A woman connected through family ties. Their stories ended because they encountered a man whose violent fantasies had been developing for years. The murders would eventually make national headlines. Investigators would connect evidence. Courts would deliver judgment. Psychologists would analyze the offender. But none of those developments can change the central truth of the case. For women lost their lives. For families endured irreversible loss. And before the investigation could begin to reveal the truth, those tragedies had already occurred. In the next chapter, we turn to the events themselves, to the progression of violence, the crimes that shocked investigators, and the disturbing path that transformed Frank Gust from a troubled individual with alarming behaviors into one of Germany's most notorious serial killers. Every major criminal case raises a difficult question. At what point does a future offender cross the invisible line between disturbing behavior and lethal violence? The answer is rarely simple. Human behavior does not unfold according to a predictable script, and investigators are often cautious about drawing direct connections between childhood experiences and adult crimes. Yet in the case of Frank Gust, the path that eventually led to multiple murders appeared to contain a series of warning signs that, when viewed in retrospect, formed a deeply unsettling pattern. Years after his arrest, investigators and psychological experts would look back through his history, searching for clues. What they found was not a sudden transformation. Instead, they found a gradual progression, a development that stretched from childhood into adulthood and eventually culminated in some of the most disturbing murders in modern German criminal history. Frank Gust was born on May 24, 1969, in Oberhausen, Germany. His early life was marked by instability. His parents divorced while he was still young, and much of his childhood was spent in care facilities rather than within a stable family environment. According to later accounts, he was frequently bullied. Such experiences do not automatically produce violent offenders. Millions of people endure childhood hardship without ever harming another person. Nevertheless, when investigators later reconstructed Gust's life, these circumstances became part of a broader effort to understand the development of his violent behavior. The first truly alarming signs reportedly appeared when he was around 8 or 9 years old. During that period, he began harming animals. Among the incidents later discussed by investigators was the killing of a guinea pig. What drew particular attention was not merely the act itself, but Gust's reported reaction afterward. According to the information available, he described feeling excitement when touching the animal's internal organs. To many people, such a statement is difficult to comprehend. For investigators examining serial homicide, however, it became one of the earliest documented indications that violence might have been associated with psychological gratification. Years later, specialists would view this event as an important warning sign. At the time, however, it remained just another disturbing incident in the life of a troubled child. The years passed. Childhood became adolescence, and the behavior grew increasingly abnormal. During his teenage years, Gust reportedly entered morgues and came into contact with human corpses. These incidents were not isolated acts of curiosity. According to investigative records, he developed obsessions involving death and increasingly disturbing fantasies connected to the deceased. These experiences later became central to psychological assessments attempting to explain his motivations. Investigators eventually concluded that Gust belonged to a category often described as sexual sadism. In simple terms, this refers to individuals who derive gratification from suffering, pain, humiliation, or death. The significance of that assessment would become tragically clear once his crimes were uncovered. By the early 1990s, the fantasies that had developed over years appeared to be evolving into something even more dangerous. Then, in 1994, the first known murder occurred. The victim was a 28-year-old woman from South Africa who was traveling through Europe. At some point during her journey, she encountered Frank Gust. The available information indicates that she was hitchhiking when Gust picked her up. Like countless travelers before her, she likely viewed the ride as a temporary step toward her destination. She had no way of knowing that she had entered the vehicle of a future serial killer. The precise details of the murder are not included in the available records, and therefore cannot be reconstructed. What is known is the outcome. Gust killed her. Afterward, he dismembered and decapitated her body. Her remains were later discovered in a forest near Ede in the Netherlands. For investigators, the discovery was shocking. The condition of the body indicated a level of violence far beyond what is typically seen in ordinary homicide cases. Yet despite the brutality, the case did not immediately reveal the identity of the offender. The murder remained a horrifying mystery. For the victim's loved ones, the loss was devastating. For investigators, it became an unresolved case. And for Frank Gust, it marked the beginning of a series of murders that would continue over the following years. One of the most troubling aspects of serial homicide investigations is the way offenders often gain confidence after successfully evading detection. Each crime becomes part of a learning process. Each failure by investigators to identify the offender reinforces the belief that they can continue. Whether Gust consciously viewed the situation this way is impossible to determine from the available evidence. What is known is that the violence did not stop. 2 years later, another victim entered his path. Then another after that. Both women were working as prostitutes and were encountered by Gust near Essen Central Station. The choice of victims is significant because individuals involved in prostitution often face elevated risks from violent offenders. Their work frequently requires interactions with strangers, making them vulnerable to predatory individuals seeking opportunities to isolate and control them. Investigators later determined that Gust approached these women and eventually murdered them. The available records describe the killings as exceptionally brutal. What distinguished these crimes was not only the loss of life, but also what occurred afterward. The bodies were subjected to severe mutilation. Certain body parts were removed. The injuries displayed a level of violence that suggested the offender's actions extended beyond simply causing death. Investigators would later conclude that these acts reflected the fantasies driving the crimes. Unlike offenders motivated by money, revenge, or concealment, Gust appeared to be motivated by the violence itself. The mutilation became one of the defining characteristics of murders. Another disturbing aspect involved the apparent placement of bodies. According to investigators, Gust sometimes left remains in locations where they would be easily discovered. This detail is important because it suggests that concealment was not always his primary concern. In many homicide cases, offenders go to great lengths to hide evidence. Here, investigators observed behavior that appeared to serve a different purpose. The discoveries shocked both the public and law enforcement. As details emerged, the crimes began attracting increasing attention. Yet the connection between them remained unclear. Investigators were dealing with separate victims, different circumstances, and crimes occurring over an extended period. The larger pattern remained hidden. Meanwhile, Gust continued living what appeared to be an ordinary life. He was married. He had children. He maintained the appearance of a normal family man. This contrast between public normality and private violence remains one of the most disturbing elements of the case. People often imagine serial killers as individuals who appear obviously dangerous. Real-life offenders frequently challenge that assumption. They can appear entirely ordinary. They can blend into their communities. They can maintain relationships, families, and routines while simultaneously committing horrific crimes. As the years passed, Gust's behavior became increasingly bold. Then came the fourth murder. This victim differed from the others in a crucial way. She was not a stranger. She was connected to him through family. According to the available information, the victim was approximately 47 years old and was his wife's aunt. The inclusion of a family connection marked a significant departure from the previous known victims. The crime demonstrated that the danger extended beyond chance encounters with vulnerable strangers. It had entered his personal circle. The available records indicate that her remains were never fully recovered. Despite this, investigators eventually gathered sufficient evidence and testimony to establish Gust's responsibility. For investigators, the absence of a complete body presented additional challenges. Nevertheless, the evidence ultimately proved convincing enough to secure a conviction. Looking across all four murders, investigators identified several consistent themes. First, the crimes were not financially motivated. There was no indication that robbery was the primary objective. Second, the murders were not committed to conceal another offense. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the violence itself appeared central to the offender's motivations. This conclusion was reinforced by information regarding Gust's fantasies. Among the most disturbing statements attributed to him was a reported desire to touch the beating heart of a dying woman. The statement horrified investigators and later became one of the most frequently cited examples of the sadistic fantasies believed to be driving his actions. It offered a glimpse into a mindset that many people struggle to comprehend. The murders were not merely acts of violence. According to investigators, they represented attempts to fulfill deeply disturbing fantasies that had been developing over many years. As more information became public, comparisons emerged between Gust and one of history's most infamous killers, Jack the Ripper. The comparison did not arise because the crimes were identical. The two cases were separated by more than a century and occurred under vastly different circumstances. Rather, the comparison reflected similarities in public perception. Both cases involved murdered women, severe mutilation, and an offender whose crimes generated widespread fear and fascination. The media eventually adopted the nickname, the Rhine-Ruhr Ripper, permanently linking Gust to that historical comparison. Yet while journalists and the public focused on the brutality of the crimes. Investigators faced a different challenge. They still needed to identify the offender. Years had passed since the first murder. Multiple women were dead. Different crime scenes existed across different periods. The pattern remained incomplete. The man responsible continued living among ordinary people, hidden behind the appearance of a husband and father. By 1998, the known murders had ended. 4 women had lost their lives. Investigators possessed pieces of a puzzle, but not the complete picture. The killer remained free. What no one yet realized was that the breakthrough would not begin with a dramatic forensic discovery or a witness stepping forward from a crime scene. Instead, it would begin with something far more ordinary and perhaps far more unsettling. A conversation, a statement made to a family member, a remark that would eventually travel from one person to another before reaching the authorities. That single chain of events would trigger the unraveling of the secret life Frank Gust had managed to conceal for years. In the next chapter, we will follow the investigation itself, the missed connections, the crucial breakthrough, the role of witness testimony and DNA evidence, and the moment when investigators finally identified the man behind the murders that had terrified Western Germany for years. By the late 1990s, 4 women were dead. The crimes had occurred over a span of several years. The victims came from different backgrounds. One was a young traveler from South Africa. 2 were women involved in prostitution whom Frank Gust had encountered near Essen Central Station. Another was his wife, Sant, a woman connected to him through family. On paper, the cases did not immediately appear to form a single narrative. They involved different circumstances, different timelines, and different victim profiles. Yet hidden beneath those differences was a single offender whose violent fantasies had already claimed multiple lives. The challenge facing investigators was not simply finding a killer. It was recognizing that the same killer was responsible for crimes that initially seemed unrelated. Looking back today, knowing the outcome, it is easy to assume that the connections should have been obvious. But criminal investigations rarely unfold with the clarity that hindsight provides. Detectives work with incomplete information. Evidence arrives gradually. Witness memories are imperfect. Different cases may be handled separately. Connections that appear clear years later often remain invisible in real time. The Frank Gust investigation illustrates this reality with disturbing precision. For years, authorities did not immediately recognize that they were dealing with a serial offender. Each murder generated its own questions. Each crime scene required its own analysis. Investigators focused on the facts available to them at the time, and those facts did not instantly reveal a single perpetrator. Meanwhile, the offender continued moving through everyday life without attracting the level of suspicion one might expect from someone responsible for such violence. This ability to remain hidden was perhaps one of Gust's greatest advantages. He did not fit the stereotype many people imagine when they think about a serial killer. He was not living on the fringes of society. He was not openly displaying violent tendencies to the public. Instead, he maintained an outwardly ordinary existence. He was married. He had children. He lived the life of a family man. To neighbors, acquaintances, and casual observers, he likely appeared entirely unremarkable. The contrast between appearance and reality would later become one of the most chilling aspects of the case. While investigators searched for answers, the man responsible was living among ordinary people, protected by the assumption that dangerous individuals should somehow look different. Yet beneath that ordinary exterior existed a hidden world of violent fantasies and homicidal behavior. As time passed, investigators continued gathering information from the various cases. Crime scenes were examined. Witnesses were interviewed. Evidence was collected and preserved. The murders remained unsolved, but the investigative process never truly stopped. Every piece of information carried the possibility of becoming the missing link. Every witness statement had the potential to reveal something important. Every forensic development offered a chance to move closer to the truth. Still, years passed without a definitive breakthrough. Then, unexpectedly, the case began to change because of something remarkably simple. Not a dramatic confession in an interrogation room. Not a witness suddenly identifying a suspect from a photograph. Not an accidental discovery at a crime scene. Instead, the first major crack in Frank Gust's carefully maintained facade reportedly emerged through a conversation. According to the available information, Gust made comments to his mother that implied he had killed people. The exact wording of those remarks is not included in the information available to us, and therefore cannot be reconstructed. What matters is their impact. For years, Gust had successfully hidden his crimes. Yet at some point, he apparently revealed enough to raise alarm. Whether the comments were intended as a confession, a boast, a test of trust, or something else entirely remains unknown. What is known is that the information did not remain secret. Gust's mother later shared what she had heard with a friend. This moment would become one of the most significant turning points in the entire case. In many criminal investigations, major breakthroughs occur because someone decides to speak. A witness comes forward. A relative reports suspicious behavior. A friend shares information that previously seemed insignificant. Such decisions can alter the course of an investigation. In this case, the mother's friend ultimately contacted the authorities. That decision transformed a disturbing conversation into actionable information. Suddenly, investigators possessed something they had lacked before, a lead pointing toward a specific individual. It is impossible to overstate the importance of this development. Until that moment, the murders existed primarily as unsolved cases. Detectives were searching for connections, examining evidence, and attempting to identify an offender whose identity remained unknown. Now, for the first time, attention could be directed toward a particular person. Of course, suspicion alone is never enough. Criminal investigations require evidence. Investigators could not simply accept an allegation and declare the case solved. The information provided by the mother's friend became a starting point rather than a conclusion. Detectives still needed to determine whether Frank Gust could actually be connected to the murders. The next phase of the investigation involved building that connection piece by piece. Authorities began assembling evidence from multiple sources. Witness testimony became an important component. Individuals who possessed relevant information were interviewed. Statements were examined and compared against existing investigative findings. Witnesses often provide critical context in homicide cases. They can establish timelines, describe encounters, identify suspicious behavior, or help place individuals in particular locations. While no single witness statement necessarily solves a case, multiple statements can gradually form a clearer picture. Alongside witness testimony, forensic evidence played a significant role. According to the available information, DNA evidence became part of the investigative process. By the late 1990s, DNA analysis had already transformed criminal investigations around the world. Cases that once depended heavily upon circumstantial evidence could now benefit from biological evidence capable of linking suspects to crimes with unprecedented precision. In the Gust investigation, DNA evidence helped strengthen the developing case. It provided investigators with objective information that could be compared, analyzed, and presented alongside other findings. Forensic evidence alone rarely tells the entire story, but it can provide crucial support when combined with witness testimony and investigative work. Another element mentioned in the available records involves a German crime investigation television program. Information connected to this program reportedly contributed to the investigation. The details of that contribution are not extensively described in the material provided, but its inclusion demonstrates how criminal investigations sometimes extend beyond traditional police work. Public appeals, media coverage, and crime-focused broadcasts can generate new leads by reaching audiences who may possess relevant information. Sometimes a single viewer recognizes a detail. Sometimes a forgotten memory resurfaces. Sometimes information reaches someone who finally decides to come forward. Whatever specific role the program played, investigators incorporated the resulting information into the broader case they were constructing against Gust. Gradually, the pieces began fitting together. Witness statements, DNA evidence, investigative findings, information connected to the television program. Each element reinforced the others. Cases that had once appeared separate increasingly pointed toward a single offender. The process was not instantaneous. Real investigations seldom are. Detectives had to verify information, eliminate alternative explanations, and ensure that conclusions were supported by evidence rather than assumptions. Yet with each step, the picture became clearer. The hidden predator operating within the Rhine-Ruhr region was no longer invisible. Frank Gust was emerging as the central figure in a series of murders that had puzzled investigators for years. Eventually, the accumulated evidence reached a critical threshold. Investigators believed they had identified the man responsible. In 1999, Frank Gust was arrested. The arrest marked the end of one phase of the story and the beginning of another. For detectives, it represented the culmination of years of investigative effort. For the public, it revealed a shocking reality. The suspect was not a mysterious drifter or an unknown outsider. He was a married man with children. He was someone who had managed to maintain the appearance of normality while allegedly committing acts of extraordinary violence. Such revelations often generate public disbelief. Communities struggle to reconcile the image of the person they thought they knew with the crimes. Investigators describe, how could someone appear so ordinary while concealing such darkness? The question echoes through countless criminal cases, and it was particularly relevant here. The arrest also brought a measure of hope to those seeking justice for the victims. After years of uncertainty, investigators finally had a suspect. Yet an arrest is not the same as a conviction. The evidence would now be tested in court. Prosecutors would have to demonstrate responsibility for the murders. Defense attorneys would challenge the allegations. Witnesses and forensic findings would be scrutinized. The legal system would ultimately determine whether the case investigators had assembled could withstand judicial examination. By the time Frank Gust entered custody, the investigation had revealed far more than the identity of a suspect. It had exposed the existence of a double life. Behind the image of a husband and father, investigators believed they had uncovered a serial killer driven not by money, revenge, or opportunity, but by deeply disturbing fantasies involving violence and suffering. The years-long mystery that began with a dismembered body discovered near Eid had finally led authorities to a single individual. The hidden connections between the murders had been identified. The unanswered questions were beginning to receive answers. But the most important stage still remained. In the courtroom, prosecutors would present the evidence. Psychologists would evaluate the accused. The families of the victims would seek accountability. And a judge would ultimately determine whether Frank Gust would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the next chapter, we move from the investigation to the trial itself, the legal battle that followed Gust's arrest, the evidence presented before the court, the psychological evaluations that shaped the proceedings, and the verdict that would forever define one of Germany's most notorious serial murder cases. When investigators arrested Frank Gust in 1999, the long search for a suspect finally came to an end. Yet for the families of the victims, the arrest was not the conclusion of the story. It was only the beginning of a new and difficult chapter. The questions that had haunted investigators for years would now be examined in a courtroom. Evidence would be tested. Witnesses would be heard. Psychologists would evaluate the accused. And ultimately, a court would decide whether the man known to the media as the Rheinruhr Ripper was responsible for the murders that had shocked Germany throughout the 1990s. Criminal trials often serve two purposes. The first is legal. Courts must determine whether the evidence proves guilt beyond the standards required by law. The second is human. Trials provide an opportunity to reconstruct events, establish accountability, and give victims and their families a measure of justice. They cannot undo what has happened. They cannot restore lost lives, but they can provide an official acknowledgement of responsibility. In the case of Frank Gust, the stakes were enormous. The allegations against him involved 4 murders committed between 1994 and 1998. The victims came from different backgrounds and circumstances, yet investigators believed they were linked by a common offender. Bringing those cases together into a coherent legal narrative required years of investigative work. By the time the matter reached court, prosecutors had assembled a case built upon multiple forms of evidence. Their task was to demonstrate that the murders were not isolated tragedies committed by unknown individuals, but components of a larger pattern connected directly to Gust. The proceedings attracted significant attention because the crimes themselves were already widely regarded as some of the most disturbing in modern German criminal history. The public had learned about the mutilation of victims, the brutality of the offenses, and the allegations regarding Gust's violent fantasies. Yet courtrooms operate according to evidence rather than public opinion. No matter how shocking the allegations, prosecutors still had to establish the facts. The foundation of the prosecution's case consisted of the evidence gathered during the investigation. Witness testimony played an important role. Throughout the investigative process, authorities had collected statements from individuals who possessed information relevant to the murders and to Gust himself. These statements became part of the broader picture presented to the court. Witness testimony is often essential in criminal cases because it helps place evidence within a human context. Physical evidence can demonstrate that certain events occurred, but witnesses frequently help explain relationships, behaviors, and circumstances that surround those events. Alongside witness testimony stood forensic evidence. According to the available information, DNA evidence formed part of the case against Gust. By the late 20th century, DNA analysis had become one of the most powerful tools available to investigators. Unlike memory, biological evidence does not forget details over time. Unlike speculation, it can be subjected to scientific examination. Within court proceedings, forensic evidence often serves as a crucial means of either supporting or challenging investigative conclusions. In this case, DNA evidence contributed to the prosecution's effort to connect Gust to the crimes under examination. The prosecution's broader argument focused on establishing a pattern, rather than viewing the murders as unrelated incidents. Prosecutors sought to demonstrate that they reflected the actions of a single offender. The similarities investigators had identified over the course of years became central to this effort. The murders involved women from vulnerable circumstances or personal connections. The crimes displayed extraordinary violence. Mutilation featured prominently. The offender's actions appeared consistent with motivations later described by psychological experts. Piece by piece, prosecutors presented the court with a portrait of an individual whose behavior extended far beyond ordinary criminal violence. Yet the trial was not solely about what happened to the victims. It was also about understanding the man accused of killing them. As often occurs in cases involving extreme violence, psychological evaluations became a significant component of the proceedings. Questions emerged regarding Gust's mental state. Investigators had already uncovered a history of disturbing behavior stretching back to childhood. Reports described animal cruelty during his early years. Accounts detailed his fascination with death and his contact with corpses during adolescence. Evidence suggested the presence of violent fantasies that had developed over many years. Such information naturally raised questions about psychological abnormalities. Courts frequently confront difficult distinctions when evaluating offenders with serious mental disturbances. The existence of psychological problems does not automatically remove criminal responsibility. Likewise, the presence of criminal responsibility does not mean psychological issues are absent. The challenge lies in determining whether an individual understood the nature of their actions and possessed sufficient responsibility under the law. In Gust's case, experts examined these questions carefully. Their evaluations acknowledged the existence of significant psychological disturbances. The available information indicates that the court recognized serious mental abnormalities. However, recognition of those abnormalities did not lead to a conclusion that Gust lacked responsibility for his crimes. Instead, the court ultimately determined that he remained criminally accountable. This distinction proved crucial. It meant that while psychological factors were considered important in understanding his behavior, they did not excuse the murders. The court concluded that he could be held responsible under the law for the actions attributed to him. For the families of the victims, this determination carried enormous significance. Criminal trials are not only about punishment, they are also about recognition. A verdict communicates society's judgment regarding what occurred. By holding Gust responsible, the court formally acknowledged that the deaths of the 4 women resulted from deliberate criminal acts for which he was accountable. Throughout the proceedings, attention remained focused on the 4 victims whose lives had been taken. The South African traveler whose journey through Europe ended in tragedy. The 2 women involved in prostitution who encountered Gust near Essen Central Station. The wife's aunt whose murder demonstrated that the violence extended even into personal family connections. Although the details of their lives were not extensively documented within the information available, their presence remained at the center of the case. Without them, there would have been no investigation, no trial, and no verdict. The legal proceedings represented society's attempt to answer for the harm done to them. Eventually, after reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments presented before the court, a decision was reached. On September 21, 2000, Frank Gust was convicted of 4 murders. The verdict marked the culmination of years of investigative work and legal preparation. For prosecutors, it represented the successful presentation of a complex case involving multiple victims and crimes spanning several years. For investigators, it validated the conclusions they had reached after painstakingly connecting evidence from separate incidents. For the victims' families, it provided a formal acknowledgement of responsibility. The sentence imposed by the court was life imprisonment. Such a sentence reflected the severity of the crimes and the danger Gust was believed to pose. In practical terms, the judgment ensured that one of Germany's most notorious serial killers would remain behind bars. Yet even after the verdict was delivered, important questions remained. One of those questions involved the possibility of rehabilitation. Modern criminal justice systems often attempt to balance punishment with efforts at treatment, particularly when offenders exhibit significant psychological disturbances. Following his conviction, Gust reportedly participated in therapeutic treatment. The decision reflected a broader belief that psychological intervention may sometimes reduce future risks or provide greater understanding of an offender's behavior. However, those efforts soon encountered serious obstacles. According to the available information, Gust discontinued therapy after approximately 6 months. The decision raised concerns among those responsible for assessing his future risk. Treatment programs rely upon participation. when an offender withdraws, opportunities for evaluation and intervention become significantly more limited. More troubling were the statements attributed to Gust after ending therapy. He reportedly declared that he could not be cured. He also reportedly stated that if released, he would continue to represent a danger to women. Such remarks carried obvious significance. They suggested an absence of confidence in rehabilitation and reinforced concerns about the persistence of the violent fantasies that investigators believed had motivated his crimes. For psychologists, legal authorities, and the public, these statements became particularly alarming because they appeared consistent with the conclusions reached during the investigation. Gust had never been portrayed as an offender driven by temporary circumstances, financial motives, or interpersonal disputes. Instead, investigators described someone motivated by deeply rooted fantasies involving violence and suffering. If those motivations remained unchanged, the prospect of future danger naturally became a matter of concern. In many criminal cases, sentencing provides a sense of finality. The offender is convicted, punishment is imposed, and the legal process largely concludes. The Frank Gust case was different. While the conviction answered the question of guilt, it also opened broader discussions about risk, rehabilitation, and the long-term management of dangerous offenders. These discussions would continue long after the courtroom proceedings ended. Nevertheless, the significance of the verdict should not be underestimated. The trial achieved what years of uncertainty had denied the victims and their families. It established accountability. The man investigators believed responsible for 4 murders had been convicted. The hidden life that existed behind the appearance of an ordinary husband and father had been exposed. The violence that remained concealed for years had finally been addressed within the legal system. Yet the story of Frank Gust does not end with a courtroom sentence. Even after conviction, public debate continued. Questions emerged regarding future legal considerations, the possibility of release under German law, and the extent to which someone with Gust's history could ever be considered safe. Those concerns, combined with the lasting impact of the murders themselves, ensured that the case would remain relevant long after the trial concluded. In the final chapter, we will examine the aftermath of the case, the debates surrounding Gust's future, the reasons criminologists continue to study his crimes, and the enduring lessons left behind by one of Germany's most disturbing serial murder investigations. When a criminal case reaches a verdict, there's often a natural desire to view that moment as the end of the story. The offender has been identified. The court has spoken. The sentence has been imposed. Justice, at least in its legal form, has been delivered. Yet some cases refuse to end so neatly. Their impact extends beyond the courtroom. They continue to generate questions, debates, and uneasy reflections long after the final judgment is entered into the record. The case of Frank Gust belongs firmly within that category. His conviction on September 21, 2000, closed one chapter of the story, but it opened another. The murders themselves had already secured a place among the most disturbing criminal cases in modern German history. The brutality of the crimes, the mutilation of victims, and the psychological characteristics attributed to the offender ensured that the case would continue to attract attention from investigators, criminologists, journalists, and the public. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the story was not the violence alone. It was the realization that such violence had existed behind the appearance of an ordinary life. By the time Gust was sentenced to life imprisonment, the image that emerged was deeply contradictory. On one hand stood the public figure, a husband, a father, a man who outwardly appeared to function within society. On the other stood the individual described by investigators and psychological experts, a serial murderer whose actions were driven by violent fantasies and sexual sadism. This contrast remains one of the reasons the case continues to be studied. Human beings naturally seek warning signs. We want dangerous individuals to be identifiable. We want risk to announce itself clearly. Cases such as Frank Gust challenge that assumption. They remind us that appearances can be profoundly misleading. Some offenders do not live outside society. They live within it. They participate in ordinary routines. They form relationships. They raise families. They create the illusion of normality while concealing behavior that would horrify those around them. If revealed, from many people following the case, that reality proved almost as disturbing as the murders themselves. The question lingered long after the trial ended. How had he managed to hide for so long? The answer was not necessarily sophistication or genius. Rather, it was the fact that the murders initially appeared disconnected. The victims came from different backgrounds. One was a traveler from South Africa. Two were women involved in prostitution. Another was a member of his extended family through marriage. Viewed separately, the crimes did not immediately reveal a single pattern. It took years for investigators to connect the cases and identify the common thread. In retrospect, the connections appear clearer. At the time, however, detectives were working within the limitations of the information available to them. This aspect of the case became an important lesson in criminal investigation. Many serial offenders are eventually identified, not because a single piece of evidence instantly reveals the truth, but because investigators gradually assemble numerous fragments into a coherent picture. The Frank Gust investigation demonstrated exactly how difficult that process can be. Yet while law enforcement professionals examined the investigative lessons of the case, psychologists and criminologists focused on something else, the offender himself. The path that investigators reconstructed after Gust's arrest became a subject of considerable interest. Among the factors that attracted attention was the reported progression from animal cruelty during childhood to homicide in adulthood. The documented incident involving the killing of a guinea pig became one of the most frequently discussed elements of his background. Specialists have long studied the relationship between early acts of cruelty and later violence. Such behavior does not guarantee future criminality, nor does every child who harms an animal become a violent offender. Nevertheless, in cases involving serial murder, early cruelty often attracts significant scrutiny because it may represent one component of a broader pattern. In Gust's case, investigators viewed the incident as part of a developmental trajectory that eventually culminated in lethal violence. Another factor that drew attention was his reported fascination with death during adolescence. According to investigative records, he entered morgues and came into contact with corpses while still a teenager. These experiences, combined with the fantasies later attributed to him, became central to efforts aimed at understanding his psychological development. Again, caution is important. Human behavior cannot be reduced to a simple formula. There is no single pathway that transforms a troubled child into a serial killer. Yet when viewed alongside the murders, these early behaviors appeared highly significant to those attempting to explain the origins of his violence. Perhaps the most important psychological conclusion reached by investigators involved sexual sadism. According to the available information, Gust was categorized as an offender who derived gratification from suffering, pain, and death. This assessment helped explain why the crimes appeared so extreme. The violence was not merely a means to an end. Investigators believed it was central to the offender's motivation. The mutilation of victims, the nature of the injuries, and the disturbing fantasies attributed to Gust all contributed to this interpretation. For criminologists, the case became an example of how deeply rooted fantasies can evolve into real-world violence. The crimes were not driven by financial gain. They were not committed to conceal another offense. They reflected motivations that many people find difficult to comprehend because they emerge from desires fundamentally disconnected from ordinary human experience. Yet perhaps the most alarming development occurred after the trial had already concluded. Following his conviction, Gust reportedly participated in therapy. At least in theory, treatment offered an opportunity to evaluate his psychological condition and potentially address some of the factors associated with his crimes. However, that effort was short-lived. According to the available information, he withdrew from treatment after approximately 6 months. More troubling still were the statements he reportedly made afterward. Gust allegedly declared that he could not be cured. He also reportedly stated that if released, he would remain dangerous to women. These remarks reverberated far beyond the prison walls. For many observers, they appeared to confirm the concerns expressed by investigators and experts. Rehabilitation remains a central goal of many modern correctional systems. But successful rehabilitation generally requires participation, insight, and a willingness to change. Gust's statements suggested profound skepticism regarding the possibility of such change. Whether interpreted as honesty, resignation, or something else entirely, the comments reinforced the perception that he continued to represent a serious risk. As the years passed, those concerns became intertwined with broader legal discussions. Under the legal framework that existed at the time of his sentencing, Gust was not automatically subject to indefinite preventive detention beyond the minimum requirements associated with a life sentence. This fact generated considerable public debate. The prospect that someone convicted of 4 murders and assessed as highly dangerous could one day be considered for release alarmed many observers. Media outlets periodically revisited the issue, asking difficult questions about risk, public safety, and the limits of rehabilitation. Experts frequently expressed concern regarding the possibility of future violence. As a result, the case remained relevant long after the courtroom proceedings had ended. Yet amid discussions about law, psychology, and criminal behavior, there's a danger of losing sight of the people at the center of the story. The victims. Their absence is the defining reality of this case. A 28-year-old traveler from South Africa never completed her journey. 2 women encountered near Essen Central Station never returned to their lives. A woman connected through family ties never came home. Everything else, the investigation, the trial, the psychological analysis, the media attention, exists because those lives were taken. This is an important distinction. True crime narratives often focus heavily on offenders because offenders generate mystery. People seek explanations for extraordinary acts. They want to understand what drives someone to commit such violence. Yet the victims deserve equal attention because they represent what was lost. Each had a future that ended abruptly. Each left behind people who cared about them. Each became part of a criminal case that would eventually make national headlines. But before they were victims, they were individuals with lives extending far beyond the circumstances of their deaths. Remembering that fact helps prevent the story from becoming solely about the killer. The legacy of the Frank Gust case therefore operates on multiple levels. For investigators, it is a lesson in persistence and the challenge of connecting seemingly unrelated crimes. For criminologists, it is a case study involving animal cruelty, fascination with death, sexual sadism, and the progression towards serial homicide. For legal scholars, it raises questions regarding punishment, rehabilitation, and long-term public safety. For society as a whole, it serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that dangerous individuals sometimes exist behind remarkably ordinary facades. But perhaps the most enduring lesson is simpler. Violence leaves consequences that extend far beyond the moment it occurs. The murders committed between 1994 and 1998 did not end when the victims died. Their effects continued through years of investigation, courtroom proceedings, psychological examinations, and public debate. They affected families, communities, investigators, and countless others who encounter the case. Even today, The story remains unsettling because it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior. It challenges assumptions about what evil looks like. It reminds us that warning signs are not always recognized in time. And it demonstrates how difficult it can be to understand the minds of those who commit acts of extreme violence. In the end, Frank Gust became known throughout Germany as the Rheinruhr Ripper. The nickname ensured that his crimes would not be forgotten. Yet perhaps the most important act of remembrance is not recalling the offender's name. It is remembering the 4 women whose lives were taken. They are the reason the case matters. They are the reason investigators search for answers. They are the reason a trial took place. And they remain the human story at the heart of one of Germany's most disturbing serial murder investigations. The court delivered its verdict. The sentence was imposed. The legal case reached its conclusion. But the questions raised by the murders and the lessons left behind by them continue to endure.